Hi, and today we're talking mobile phone safety. Now, nobody wants to give up their mobile phone, including myself. Mobile phones are ubiquitous throughout the world. Everyone is using a mobile phone. Life becomes quite hard, especially to run a business without using a mobile phone. It's definitely convenient for all of us to use it. The problem is that there's a big difference between an adult using a mobile phone and a child using a mobile phone. And I see way too often people giving children mobile phones, letting them play on devices and, almost using them as a bit of a babysitter in many cases. So there's definitely a place for technology today amongst our children, just not in the way that we're using it. And so I want to talk a little bit about mobile phones today and how we can make them safer for us to use. And it's quite a fitting topic as we've just had a $25 million study released from the States from the National Toxicology Program showing that 30 minutes of mobile phone use a day over 36 years hugely increases your risk of cancer and tumour. This was a rodent study that they did, which is very much mimics the same biologicals as a human. And that is a really scary finding because if you think, I know for myself, that's just 30 minutes a day. That's quite easily achievable. And if you're looking at children and you're handing them a phone and they're listening to something from little age, that means, by the time they reach like my age, that they've got a huge increased risk of getting cancer. So I think I don't think we can be complacent when it comes to mobile phones and children. Children are far more susceptible than we are when it comes to mobile phones and the amount of radiation that they absorb per kilo. We know that it has the ability they have a thinner skull, so it has the ability to heat more tissue across the brain. We don't fully understand all of the biological or physiological effects of using that microwave or cell phone radiation on them, but we do know that it increases the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, so it allows things to cross over to the brain that wouldn't normally be there. So chemicals that, we sort of have a protective coating to stop finding their way to our brain tissue then has access to the brain. So it's really concerning, especially considering the amount of neurological disorders or learning disabilities or anything to do with the brain that we see these days, because we know that there is a lot of brain toxicity going on, and mobile phones are definitely adding to this. So in 2011, the World Health Organization classified mobile phones as a group 2B carcinogen. So that means that they possibly cause cancer. For the World Health Organization to go against the telecoms industry is absolutely huge, and the amount of evidence that was, there for that decision to be made was absolutely huge. Again, if you have time, and I'll put the link for it on the email, is to read the Bioinitiative report of 2012. It has 1,800 studies in there, all showing, quite scary adverse health effects when it comes to mobile phones. So we know they're in our life, we know they're not good. So how do we use them, and how do we use them more safely? So when it comes to a mobile phone, distance is key. You really need to make sure that you're keeping it away from the body. We have no vital organs in our hands, so holding the phone in our hand is not the end of the world if you're texting or receiving a call from that. Ideally, we don't want to be using a mobile phone, but it's kind of, a little bit impractical these days to go that way. So really reducing the amount of calls that we are making, really questioning, do I need to make this now? Is it something that I can make on my landline, corded landline, which I encourage everyone to do? Can I make it shorter? Am I just being on the phone because I'm bored? Am I just, scrolling through because, I don't want to do the dishes or what have you? So we really need to think about why we're using it, really limit down the length of the conversation and the number of conversations that we're having. When we're using it, we need to make sure that we're in an area that has good reception, because reduced reception will mean that the phone emits a lot higher, not just a small amount, but it is a huge amount higher. This also goes for when you're in a moving vehicle or a train. because it's constantly trying to find that signal as well. We don't want to be using our phone in our car because it's a little bit like sitting into a microwave. Well, it's a lot like putting ourselves into a microwave. We know that those radio frequencies just bounce off everything. So car is pretty much the worst place that you could be using your phone. And you'll often notice that children, and I see this a lot with different models of cars, depending on how they're set up, and the kind of Bluetooth that they're using, is that children often get quite car sick or headachy in the car. That can happen to people as well. They often start getting a bit of a pressure headache. Some people start to get like a soreness or, like a pain going through the side of the head when they're in the car and using it. That's a real telltale sign that your body is not enjoying the amount of radiation that you're exposing it to. And I would hate to see what a study would look like if you were using your phone for half an hour a day in the car. Other things that need to be kept in mind, I mean, obviously we should never, ever, 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 ever be putting the phone to our head. When you sign your contract, it says in there that the phone is not to be placed directly to the head. Telstra sends out messages. I know I get one every sort of 6 to 12 months from them about mobile phone safety and reducing EMF. They all know about it. They're all aware of it. There's not a demand for safer phones as yet, and so it's not really on the agenda. They are coming down slightly, but not enough. And our use is increasing dramatically, so it sort of cancels each other out. We need to make sure that we're not carrying the phone on our body. I have a number of cases or case studies where people have kept the phone in their top pocket or in their cargo pants, and as a result ended up with a cancer or a tumour coming directly underneath that, especially in the top pocket with guys. We see breast cancer. I have a friend who has cancer of the bone on his thigh bone, where he had a mobile phone in his cargo pocket for many, many years. Ways that you can use them, so if you're out and about, obviously using the speaker option is good. If you can't use a speaker option, these things here, these are, trying to show you here, these are air tubes. So these, from where that black bit there is just a plastic tube that goes all the way up. There's no wire inside there. That's why they're called an air tube. So those ones you can just put in, have your normal conversation. The phone's far enough away from the body. And you can use that for kids as well. So if a child's wanting to use a device, firstly, it must be in flight mode. They can't have it in normal mode. So that goes for your iPads and tablets. It has to be in flight mode. So downloading a little video, or if it's an interactive game that can be played on flight mode, then downloading that and using a set of air tubes if it's noisy, or just having it on speaker if not, is fine. We don't ever want to be using them while they're being charged. That is a big no-no, again, because they're emitting, especially with the tablets, because you have an electromagnetic field that goes around the outside. We never want to see them on laps or around our reproductive systems. That's almost just as important as not having it near the head. Putting your phones on flight modes at night. I know some people use a few sleep apps and things like that, especially with kids. Try and download it and put it onto a flight mode. We shouldn't be having mobile phones in the bedroom at all. Flight mode is the exception, and your alarm will still work. Definitely no charging of mobile devices, whether they're in flight mode or not, in the bedroom. And limiting that screen time as well, because we know that blue light really diminishes melatonin, especially with our children. It's also really closely linked with behavioural disorders as well, and behavioural issues. So even down to the sort of pleasure and pain receptors in the brain, and the behaviour disorders that are associated with that, and that's mainly coming out of the games and apps and that kind of thing. So I think that's pretty much it. We want to limit the calls. We want to make sure it's away from the body. We never want to store it on the body. Use it in flight mode when you can. Put it in flight mode in your car. I download my podcasts and I download music and I put them on in the car in flight mode, so that I don't have to listen to the radio. Making sure that it's not in charge when it's used. Making sure that you're stationary when you're using it, that you've got good reception when you're using it, and that's pretty much it. So what I'd like you to do for the next week is try and download as many things. If your children do use apps, see what you can put on as an app, see what music you can download or videos or things like that that you can put on there, and see if you can completely avoid, which I highly recommend, completely avoid ever having the child have the phone with it in while it's sort of active and receiving and emitting. So for this week, try and limit the use, see what you can do. Everyone will probably wonder where you've gone because they won't have received any, hour-long phone conversations. And I will see you next week. Thank you.